And just to check that's all recording for everyone.
Do you think we can make Josh have to do the intro like 4 times again? Just by chuckling.
Yeah, I mean, we could bring up his goose phobia again, and then he'd have to do it again.
Guys, please don't. Quiet on the floor,
Josh
please.
was bitten by a goose once, guys. Now he's terrified of them.
It was traumatic. I don't want to talk about it.
It's for the outtakes at the end of the year.
Who the fuck gets bitten by a goose?
This,
How does that even happen?
Hello and welcome to the Unlucky Frog Gaming Podcast. You are joined by your usual hosts, Tom Mannering, Ben Porter, and Josh Hartley. Interrupting all of that. How are we all doing tonight, guys?
We're doing good.
Doing great, mate.
Yeah.
You seem like you got something on your mind. Is there something you want to talk about?
No, we're moving on from like the incident where I got bit by a goose at university. We're not talking about that. We were talking about that before we recorded, but that is not relevant to anything that we're going to be covering on this podcast, wherein we talk about tabletop
Yeah,
board
but first
games.
we're going to clear this up, right? Because I just want to say, like... pretty much everyone can list, like, a good handful of people that have been bitten by, like, cats and dogs, right? Maybe even, like, a hamster or something. How many people, Tom, do you know that have been bitten by a goose?
I can name one person, and he's on this podcast right now.
Look, they're vicious. They're fucking psychopaths.
In a way, it's like a claim to fame, mate. You know, you're a unique individual in your deliciousness to gooses.
Yeah. It's like, I feel like it's
that goose was just eyed me up while I was on campus and just went, gotta get me some of that.
Were you trying to, like, you know, eke it on a bit, sort of seductively, kind
I
of?
was. I had
bit
it.
of gravy.
I did have it. I did have it coming.
What did you do? Did you antagonise the goose?
Did you make a comment about its
It's
weight?
like, a goose. No.
Why would you? Why would you be like, there's a random goose. Better get up close
Did
to
you
see
think
what's...
for a minute you were like?
you're
Did you think
asking-
for a
you're-
minute you were David Attenborough or something like that? You
Guys,
just absolutely
like,
smacked
you're
out your
asking-
tits, running about campus
you're-
making documentaries.
Guys, you are asking an irrational man to rationalise this irrational action.
Can you imagine like a nature
There's no
documentary?
rhyme or reason.
Nature documentary, like, run by Josh. You know, David Attenborough's got that nice, soft, soothing voice. You've got Josh like, I see a goose!
And every scene would end with "oh shit" and the camera dropping and him trying to run away.
It's that Blair Witch style shaky cameras.
But it's like not threatening animals, like all sort of like quite tame animals based in the UK. It's like foxes,
Frogs.
geese,
Fox
like
is
a
not
vole.
tame.
Relatively tame. I'm saying like not fucking lions.
Josh, please
Like-
do not approach foxes. Okay, don't do that.
I've got a fox that comes into my back garden regularly.
Right, don't approach him. Okay.
I don't. I learned from the goose. See, I learn.
Anyway, should we talk about gaming?
Yes. We should. We've got like a main topic lined up in the chamber, but I think we're going to talk a couple of like brief news items and shout outs. Ben, you spotted something.
Yeah,
this
two
week.
things. I mean, first of all, let's sort of preface this by saying that it's been a pretty slow week as far as tabletop gaming news. Combination of the fact that a good portion of the world's still in some kind of lockdown, and it is January, so it's it's just generally a bit slow at the moment. But this week, Steamforged revealed some of the pledge levels for the upcoming Monster Hunter World board game. They don't actually have a date for it yet. They've just got April this year.
Right.
But they
so we can't even back it yet.
No, it's just April 2021 is all they've got. Again, it's a humongous boxed game with a ridiculous amount of expansions, and then you've got loads of the big chunky monsters that the Monster Hunter IP is known for. But I mean, it's Steam forged, so
listeners, listeners can't see the expression on like all of our faces, but we've all read this book before.
Yeah,
Like,
we've all done this dance a few times. I think my big issue with sort of the model they use, and Kickstarter's partly to blame for this. I've seen Steamforged do it, Cool Mini or not do it as well. They go to there's too much sometimes, like from the word go. Like when I buy a game, I want to get the game, right? And I want to know that I'm going home to play everything there is to play for that game. And then like 3 months down the line, if the company brings out an expansion for that game, I'll get that expansion, I'll go and play that, and I'll be excited about it. And then 3 months later, rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
I remember like with Wingspan, I remember, Ben, when the expansion came out for that, you were quite excited about it because you'd obviously really enjoyed the game.
Yeah, sure.
I do it with things like Legendary and Champions and stuff like that. But these...
Oh, how you do it with Legendary and Champions.
But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. But Steamforged and like Cool Mini and other places, these like you get the core game and then you get like 8 expansions, and it's like if you don't have these expansions, you don't have the full game. So you've got to go in, and they use kind of FOMO tactics to kind of make you bid at the top end. It really annoys me. I don't like it at all.
Yeah, I've never gone in for like these big box games on Kickstarter where you get 1,000,001 add-ons and extras and the like. I can't help but feel like are people not getting tired of this stuff now?
I mean, they're obviously still making money off it, right? Like you look at even like Cool Mini or not put up a bit of a Diddy Kickstarter at the beginning of the month, I think it was, and they were doing like it was like a Looney Tunes and a Scooby Doo game, something weird like that. It's still like racked up hundreds of thousands on that, so there's still a market for it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've bought a couple of I've got one Steamforged game, which was Dark Souls, and I've since moved it on because it just didn't get played.
It was like, because we played it a couple of times, and like for a dungeon crawler game, I wasn't particularly impressed with it.
No, I mean, like there's some cool stuff, like you had the AI deck with the for the bosses, which was pretty cool.
Which we did brave.
Yeah, we found a way to cheese it.
Which in a way is very Dark Souls.
Yeah, it is, right. Like you find a glitch and then you just exploit the crap out of it. But what I'd heard, I mean, like I know a lot of professional news organisations are like, we do not comment on rumour and speculation, but we're not a professional organisation, so we absolutely will comment on rumour and speculation. What I'd heard was that it's worth saying with the Dark Souls board game, we only ever played that first scenario. We didn't go any further.
Yeah, we didn't dive deep.
But what I'd heard from people that had played through more of the board game was they said that first scenario was the best bit, and the game just like falls off a cliff after that, which again is very Dark Souls. But what I'd heard was Steamforged had acquired the IP for Dark Souls, did this Kickstarter which was hugely successful, but they hadn't actually designed the game. So after the Kickstarter, I've just heard this like from one of my sources, so I don't actually have anything to say this is a concrete thing, but given the state of the game, it's believable. But allegedly they hired a cabin, a bunch of them piled into this cabin over a long weekend and designed the board game.
Wow.
You have scenarios like that where they can lead to moments of like mad genius, but usually for most people they lead to shit. I mean, you get like I remember a cool story I heard when I was watching a documentary like behind the scenes of Skyrim, and the guy Todd Howard said that he approached like the music director after they'd finished doing Oblivion, and he said, "I've got this mad idea, but bear with me. The Elder Scrolls theme sung by a Viking choir," and the guy went home, like composed the music and came up with the dragon language over a weekend.
Wow.
I can believe that.
I mean, you
this Dark Souls wasn't that, you know.
No, yeah, Dark Souls was not one of those strokes of genius. Yeah, like I know what you mean. Like, it's an interesting creative exercise. You hear about musicians doing it a lot. I think like one of the more famous ones is Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age will invite a bunch of guest musicians, and they'll do the desert sessions where they just go out to like a remote part of, like, I think it's the Arizona desert that they go to, and just spend a long weekend writing music together. And it's very hit or miss. Like, but it's like, yeah, it doesn't, it certainly isn't a process that leads to consistency.
No.
Let's generously put it like that. I've got a pal who absolutely loves the Monster Hunter franchise. Chris, if you're listening, hi. He's the only guy I know who actually plays those games. Do we know anyone who plays Monster Hunter?
I know a few people.
I've dipped my toe in. I found it quite grindy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's what appeals to some people. Though.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people like that, like it for that. Have they hinted at all about how this game's going to work?
So you've got a bunch of massive monster miniatures and some hunters. It looks as though you've got a map with a bunch of nodes that the monsters move over. So it looks quite similar to what they did with Dark Souls, to be perfectly honest with you.
I was just going to say.
It's probably going to be a sort of boss attack type game.
Yeah.
They've just done, not long ago, they just finished the sort of dispatch of the Devil May Cry game, which was very similar. It was, you had a couple of characters and you go in and it's just sort of waves of bosses and monsters that attack you. It just seems like they've got a kind of formula that they shake up a little bit, you know, put in a different flavour.
Yeah.
Do you know what Steamforged are like? It's I mean, I can't think of any examples off the top of my head. Certainly not examples that like most people are going to understand. But they're like, you know, when you have like a really promising up and coming athlete, and like he has like a phenomenal first season, and then it's just after that. That's been Steamforged.
Ashley Cole,
There you go.
basically.
Yeah.
Not Ashley Cole. I'm gonna cut that bit out because I'll sound like
in basketball, it's there's a guy, Kwame Brown. That's what happened to him.
Oh yeah,
like
that guy.
Yeah, you know the one. He was like, you know, first pick of like first round draft. Can't remember the year, and then he just like his career just tanked after that. And like so, like Steamforged had the same thing, right? Because they started off with Guild Ball, which I've not
really
had the honour of playing, but it still has a fanatical following, even though they decided that that their own game was too toxic to continue existing, and took it round the back and gave it the old Yeller treatment. You know, weird.
It's bizarre, right? Yeah. Because I mean, I'm sure that it's no coincidence that they did that after GW put like the sort of like electric paddles to Blood Bowl and like made that rise from the dead.
Yeah. Anyway, like it's a really weird like trajectory they've gone through, because they started out the gate so strong with such a great game, and then they've released all these weird like licensed board games.
It's because they make so much money. I
guess.
They
did the Critical Role minis that I got, and and after they did the initial 2 box sets, they did like a year of resin releases, one every month, which I got picked up as well. And then they just dropped off. And I think it's because I don't think they got the license renewed on it by the Critical Role sort of company, as it were, because I think there was a lot of fan backlash about the quality of the minis on the first run.
Oh, I remember that.
And I think that's one of Steamforge's big issues is they overpromise and underdeliver in a lot of ways, and I think they try and take the easiest route rather than doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
I mean, it is also worth saying that like Critical Role have now established their own game company, so there'll probably be a bit of that as well, right? Like they'll just be doing their own stuff going forward.
Well, they've licensed their minis are now licensed to WizKids.
Oh, are they? Okay.
Yeah, they announced at the start of the year that WizKids had got the license, but they're doing like the sort of plastic pre-painted ones, which I don't really like because I find the quality.
I was just gonna say it's bad times when like the WizKids, the WizKid minis are the better option, right?
Yeah, definitely.
No, like the thing is, those WizKid minis like cost next to nothing. So like, in my head, they almost get a free pass for not being as nice. But how much were people paying for those ones made by Steamforge?
Well, that was part of the issue that came up. So the initial boxes they did for each of the teams were like in the region of 30 quid, say. And then when they started doing the single resin minis, they started at about 8 quid. But over the course of the year, they'd gone up to about 13 quid. So they were really. It looked like they were trying to almost kind of profiteer on it, because that's a massive hike. You know, it's an extra 50% onto the price of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of dubious behaviour.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, so to summarise, dear listener, Steamforged are doing yet another video game IP game, but none of us are excited for it. Well, we'll include a link so that you can make your own mind up. And by all means, if you do like the look of it, please let us know and inform us that we're morons. Moving on, we've got a little shout out to give to haven't we?
We have, yeah. So my friend Will, who works for Games Workshop, recently painted a really nice Gargant model. And it was picked up by the Warhammer Community Hobby Roundup on yesterday's, which is Friday. No, we're Friday now. Thursday of recording. He had a really nicely done Gargant model from Age of Sigmar. And he got a little appearance on there and a little shout out, and that's his second time on this. So I just wanted to give him a wee shout out because it was awesome.
Yeah. I like Ben and I have seen the finished article as well, and he has done a very nice paint job on that.
Yeah, he's done quite a bit of converting on it as well, because it's got a sort of gothic horror, like Pyramid Head almost vibe going, which is quite cool.
Yeah, I think it's a very characterful model, the way he's kind of worked with it, and a lot of the little details really add to that. Like there's a really nice kind of ethereal green lighting from the lantern around its neck, and it's got blood on its knuckles, and it's got like the statue from the hammer from a statue of Sigmar. So it all comes together quite nicely.
I don't know if he's developed sort of any lore around this model, but in my head I'm imagining that lantern is like some sort of magical artifact that some guy's controlling this creature through.
Funnily enough, he's going to be using it as an ally for his undead list, and he kind of wanted that lantern to kind of have a sort of an undeady, ethereal kind of quality that would kind of tie it into
for sure,
into the rest of the team.
Worth also stating again, how nice is the that Mega Gargant kit in general?
I think I mean this. We still need to decide on this, but for me, it was the best miniature they put out last year.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's definitely up there. It is without a doubt. Yeah, gorgeous mini. Not really much of a mini. It's more of a maxi. I don't know what.
Well,
to
it is.
Don't call him Maxi,
They're
mate.
big-
That's
It's still a miniature
They're big lads.
insofar
They're
as
big
it
lads.
is a model of a guy the size of a building.
yeah.
Yeah,
To
there we go.
scaled down, so it's still a miniature.
Yeah. So no, nice one, Will, and we look forward to seeing more of your handiwork. Anyway, our sort of main topic this week. So, as of this recording, tomorrow the pre-orders go out for the new Dark Angels stuff that Games Workshop is releasing. We're not going to talk about that though. What we are going to talk about is Dark Angels. I don't think I'm wrong in saying this. Is within the Warhammer 40k community are probably one of the most hated factions. People love to
They're the
bash on
whipping
them.
boys for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought it would be interesting to gather our thoughts and see what some of the factions that from different games and settings that they just love to hate. And this could there's no real rules behind this. Could be the fluff behind them, could be annoying to play against, whatever, anything goes. So I'm going to kick things off. A system we've all played and is dear to us all, Warhammer Fantasy.
Yeah.
High Elves, right? Snooty, arrogant, borderline fascist, but Games Workshop didn't quite have the gonads to go all in on that.
Or made the right decision not to go all in on that.
I think that would have been an interesting thing for them. Like they look like good guys, but secretly they're really bad. I think that would have been quite cool. Mind you, they're kind of doing that with like all the Imperium factions in 40k anyway, so might have been a bit too similar for them. And to top it off, they were horrible to play against. They were just you couldn't do anything.
I remember the Sword Masters where they had they were like the only great weapon team that still hit you first, despite the fact they had great weapons. And like even if you had a higher initiative and everything, it was just so janky back in the day.
Yeah.
They had. Who was the guy who wrote their army book?
Matt Ward, of course.
Matt Ward, the notorious.
Yeah.
That's it. It's the notorious Matt Ward.
A name that strikes fear.
Yeah. Towards the end, he wrote all of the elf books, and with the exception of Wood Elves, like Dark Elves and High Elves were both nasty. And
Wood Elves weren't bad either.
yeah, but not to the extent that Dark Elves and High Elves were brutal.
Yeah, it was. So for me, it's like it was like a combo of the fact that it like horrible to play against, and in lore they're a bunch of douchebags. So like.
Yeah,
That's fair.
They've got some interesting lore as well. Like Tyrion and Teclis were both quite interesting characters, and it's quite nice to see that they've carried them over. I think in the old world the High Elves had some really interesting stuff, but yeah, I like the fact they did lean into the fact that they were pretty horrible, and obviously as a dwarf player, I was always pretty happy to see them get a tanking.
Get a thrashing.
Yeah. Take this opportunity to remind everyone that the dwarfs won the War of the Beards because they forced the elves out of the old world. Cheerio.
Why did they call that the War of the Beard? Only one side had beards. Like,
Right.
It's not like elves were or did the elves try and have grow beards for
the
it?
elves called it the War of the Beards as a mark of disrespect to the dwarfs. The dwarfs called it the War of Vengeance, and the reason that it's called that is King Calidor II had some dwarven ambassadors sent to him to negotiate trade treaties, and he thought it'd be funny to shave them and send them back.
Which is like one of the worst things you can do to a dwarf.
Yeah. So the elves thought it was funny that the dwarfs were so insulted by this and called it the War of the Beard, whereas the dwarfs called it the War of Vengeance, because it was like the greatest sign of disrespect that you could show, especially when you're supposed to be friends with someone, right? Like,
I mean, I imagine as a bearded gentleman, Ben, you'd be fairly miffed if I broke into your house one night and shaved you in your sleep.
Yeah, you'd be furious.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a rational.
I think to get kind of
would it be grounds for starting a war?
As comical as it sounds, the stuff about like the elves shaving the dwarfs, there are a lot of cultures in our world and throughout our history where men were required to grow a beard or wear their hair a certain way. Like I can remember in school being told some pretty horrible accounts of the way that Orthodox Jewish men were treated in occupied Poland and in some of the ghettos.
Yeah.
So it's, the Nazis did some really nasty things to them, and I think when you have that knowledge, and then you see, in fiction, like the High Elves shaving the Dwarven ambassador, you then see it from both sides, right? Because like you see it as being silly from the ignorant worldview of the High Elf, but you see the horror of it because you think, like I've got friends that are Sikh or Muslim or whatever. Like, imagine if something like that was done to them. That is just egregious.
Yeah.
So it makes the High Elves seem all that much more horrible for that.
I was just gonna say, like, point proven, utter douchebags. Yeah. So, you had a different suggestion for Warhammer Fantasy, though.
Yeah, Skaven. And the thing is, right, like, I mean, everyone's got this weird sort of affection for the little rat dudes, right? I mean,
I think that, yeah, lore-wise, I think they're awesome.
They're pretty cool villains, like even down to the stuff like in the old world where, like, rat men were like this conspiracy reserved for like weirdos and hermits, but like you as someone reading the fiction or like being a player, you knew. So like it added to this frustration of like, oh, they're everywhere and you're not doing anything about them, and then you become like the crazy guy, like raving about them, right? And it's another one of these weird things where like your own real world experience is informed by something in the game, and then it makes you think like, oh, here I'm like getting really mad that these people won't believe me about these rat men, and it then makes you think about all these like crazy people that you think of, and you're like, maybe David Icke isn't so mental after all, maybe the Queen is a lizard.
We've made some leaps in logic there.
Yeah.
I just want to point that out.
Anyway, back to Skaven. So, in summary, like fluff-wise and with their aesthetics, with the mad like electric hamster wheels and all that, great. They were one of the worst factions to play against in fantasy, without a doubt.
Because there was just hundreds of them, right?
There were just hundreds of them, and they were so busted.
Yeah.
But from what I mean, I never played Skaven. I played against them and found them really annoying. But my understanding was that it was supposed to represent the sort of claptrap nature of all their improvised machinery and weaponry. That it could be devastatingly powerful, but it could also like take out half of the Skaven army as well.
Yeah.
They're not busted in the way that High Elves were, where High Elves were like peak Warhammer Fantasy, like playing against them was almost always brutal. Skaven could backfire on the Skaven player, but equally they did have characters that cost like 20 points, and you could equip them with like 15-point items and like take out an entire like elite unit.
It was the Doom Rocket, wasn't it?
The fabled Doom Rocket, yeah.
Yeah. What were they thinking?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'd be on the same page as you if we had in our gaming group, like back when we were playing 8th, if we had a Skaven player, but we didn't.
Who did we
So
have that played High Elves?
Stuart played High Elves, did he not?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
There was someone else. I'm sure we had there was a few people who played. High Elves are the ones that stick it out in my mind as oh god, here we go again. Faction.
It is worth also saying that as much as people get misty-eyed about Warhammer Fantasy, that was a horribly balanced game. It was really badly designed.
No, it was not balanced even remotely. Not even in the way that Age of Sigmar and 40k, they're not balanced games, but my god, they're a lot better than Warhammer 8th.
Yeah, I mean, part of it was they were in the middle of the Tom Kirby years, right? And Tom Kirby's mantra was we make toy soldiers, end of. Mm-hmm. So it meant that game design and that took a bit of a back seat to the miniature production side of things. But I get really annoyed when you see people on Age of Sigmar threads bring back Warhammer Fantasy. It's no, this is just your nostalgia talking. It is not as good as you remember it.
Well, we're gonna. I mean, I'm personally intrigued to see what Warhammer: The Old World is gonna look like. I hope it calls back to that era, but doesn't have has proper rules written for it, and what
are your thoughts on Warhammer Fantasy, Tom?
As in factions, or just in general?
Well, just that I feel like we're kind of summing up. I think we all agree that High Elves and Skaven were the worst offenders. But
I think fluff-wise, so the additional Warhammer you're referring to was sort of when I worked at Games Workshop, and they were two factions that were frequently kind of called out by people as being busted. So I think that's fairly consistent. They're not my least favourite faction. But mine isn't because of rules. Mine is fluff and aesthetic, and mine was Lizardmen. I despise Lizardmen in Old World Fantasy. Absolutely despise them. I don't like the aesthetic. I don't like most of the models. I didn't particularly like their backstory. I think frogs on thrones flying around are ridiculous.
No.
If I set down my armor, I played these kind of grounded dwarves. My dwarves were quite gritty, and I'd sort of set them down on the board and be like, "Here's my dwarf army," and a guy would be like, "Here's my dinosaurs and my fat frog on a throne," and I'd be like, No, my head just cannot take this. It's stupid.
This is it. You're saying an army of dinosaurs, and I think that sounds amazing. So
it doesn't, and it's a personal thing, but it does not sync with my view of the old world. I accept the new world Lustria was a place, but I couldn't understand why. I certainly couldn't understand why the Lizardmen would ever come to the old world, as it were. And the idea of a lot of the armies going to the new world, you wouldn't take a military force into a tropical jungle like that. It's a stupid tactical thing to do.
I feel like that really I think underpins a lot of the fundamental problems with the old world as a setting, right? Is that there isn't a lot of incentive for these factions really to meet one another.
Yeah. No, and I think the issue with the old world, as fond of it as I am, it was built over a 30-year period where Games Workshop were quote unquote borrowing, wholesale ripping off, frankly, elements from almost every facet of fantasy fiction.
Yeah.
And they're trying to cram it into this one planet. So yeah, it did end up being very patchwork. So I will give you that. I still think they're a really cool army, though.
I never liked them. I didn't like skinks. I know a lot of people really liked skinks. I didn't like Saurus. Don't get me wrong, I love dinosaurs in my fantasy, not necessarily Warhammer, but fantasy in general. Although I tend to, if I'm running, for example, a role-playing game with dinosaurs, I won't refer to them by their scientific names because that kind of busts my head as well, because that makes no sense. It's more like how in, do you remember Land Before Time, the T-Rex is called Sharptooth because it's a big dinosaur with a sharp tooth?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yes. That to me is,
that
thing, how you would approach it. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I couldn't get behind them. They didn't feel proper for the setting.
Mm-hmm.
The system itself was fine. Like I was never a massive fan of. I love Warhammer Fantasy as a setting for novels and role playing games and all that, but as a war game, I didn't get into it the same way I did 40k. The big turn off for me was movement trays, which is one of the things I was glad they ditched in Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the big issue with 8th was the buy-in, right? You could get like a reasonable sized, like at the time a reasonable sized Warhammer 40k army for a couple of hundred. I don't think I'm exaggerating. To get like the 2,000 point like sized army for 8th edition, it was high hundreds, like possibly depending on which faction, you could be spending thousands just to like get into the game.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally get why they've downscaled everything and went for the more like moved away from like the regimented battles.
Mm-hmm.
Side of things.
Well, the core of my dwarf army, I think, was like 3 30-man units, and that was for an elite army.
Yeah. Imagine running night goblins where you're literally playing with like 200 miniatures.
Yeah.
Like, and individually, night goblins didn't cost you that much, but it adds up.
Yeah.
And let alone like getting one of the, albeit super nice, like Forge World Chaos Dwarf army. That was the disgusting display of wealth right there.
Yeah,
they've been discontinued now.
Yeah, they have. Yeah.
I think that's a real shame. There's no reason why. I mean, you know the fluff behind Age of Sigmar more than I do, Ben. Is there any reason why they couldn't be in Age of Sigmar? They've literally got.
They were never really a thing in Age of Sigmar, right? Like they made allusions to this sort of shadowy fortress that may or may not, but they never actually like featured. Like there was never like a story or an anecdote where like, oh yeah, there's the Chaos Dwarfs kind of thing.
That'll be one of those things that they've got in like a glass box that they just break if they need to like make a big sale off nostalgia.
Like Sisters of Battle, basically.
Yeah, they're going to Sisters of Battle them at some point.
Break in case of nostalgia.
Yeah. Maybe moving on to examining 40k. Tom, do you want to regale us on your hatred of power armor?
Yeah, I'll be very brief because I covered this quite recently in an episode. I just don't like how many Space Marine factions there are and how much support they get. And it does tie into sort of Dark Angels and Blood Angels. I mean, we're on a new edition of 40k. We've already got a Space Marine Codex. We've already got a Blood Angels Codex. We've now got a Dark Angels Codex on the horizon. I just... Power armor does my tits, to be blunt about it. I just get sick of seeing power armies on the table. I get sick of, coming up against mirror matches of, one's Marine Force versus another Marine Force that narratively makes barely any sense, although they do have the odd scrap. These full-on wars between the factions are few and far between. So yeah, that's just my 10 cents on it. I love the different armies in 40k, and I wish they got more love as opposed to, the poster children of the system.
I will caveat that with Dark Angels, this should be like the last Imperium-based power armor army for a little while. They've still got to do Grey Knights, mind, but
Black Templars as well.
They have announced that they're going to do a supplement for Black Templars. Yeah, okay.
Space Wolves had one.
Space Wolves have had Wolves and Deathwatch have had theirs last year as well.
See, Deathwatch is another one. Right? I loved Deathwatch in the fluff, but now they're an army, and I'm like, why are these guys an army? They were supposed to be a crack team in the fluff, where you got like 5 of the best dudes from all the Marine factions, and you sent them into like a Tyranid hive or an orc fortress, and they just went to town. And now you're fielding armies of them, and I'm like, what? It's like the best of 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 the best. Like, come on.
While Tom is ranting about Power armor armies. I want to jump on that bandwagon to complain about Space Wolves.
Okay. Shoot. Yeah, you were really disappointed with their fluff.
Yeah, and this makes me hate them even more, right? Because I was so bitterly disappointed with it, because I think, I'm a bit of a history nerd, okay? So when I first hear Space Wolf, I think, like, because one of the names that the Vikings went by was the Sea Wolves. That's what they get called. So naturally you think Space Wolves, right? Oh, cool. It's like Vikings in space. No.
The thing is, aesthetically, that is what they are.
They're
as well,
furries
right?
in space, guys. They have fangs, and they, like, I mean, short of sniffing each other's arses, they carry on like dogs. It's just the worst.
Furries in space is what we're going to call this episode, just FYI.
I hate them so much. Like, they wear baby blue armor with yellow bits on it.
It's interesting because, like, I don't know what, like my main faction in 40k is Death Guard. Like, I don't know if there would have been anything fluff wise that they could have put in for me to put me off them, just because I really like the aesthetic and the model range.
Maybe if it was something like they're called Death Guard, and it's, one of their customs is like, pour the tea, Rotigus. Brother Typhus is bringing the crumpets.
I'd love that if they all ate tea and crumpets. Headcanon now, that's official.
Okay, I've not made it very well, but the point I'm making is like they have some, like, behaviour that just totally turns you off that you didn't really expect.
They eat poo.
Yeah.
I mean, they probably do. They're pretty rancid.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, they are disgusting.
Yeah.
So
what faction do you dislike then, Josh?
40k wise, so here's the thing. And it's not like I dislike them. I enjoy making fun of the Tau.
The Tau are a bit of a whipping boy.
Yeah, and I love the fact that in every codex, there's almost every codex has like a double page spread of art of whatever faction that is beating the crap out of the Tau. So here's the thing. I was saying before the recording, because Callum, Lanky Santa, actually collected Dark Angels, and so he was defending them in our chat. I think the reason why people love to hate on Dark Angels is that they are the edgiest faction in a universe full of edgy factions, right? The Tau are the opposite. They're the only, apart from the Space Orcs, who are just there having a great time. But, like, they're the only faction that's quite, like, optimistic and almost, like, classic sci-fi.
I would probably argue that the Tau, of all the factions in 40k, are probably the good guys. As much as they are portrayed as kind of communists in a lot of how they're put over, they are all about the greater good. They're all about, bringing people together. More so than the Imperium, who are basically just...
The Imperium are evil.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
straight up evil.
With the exception of the Salamanders, right? Because, altruism is part of their creed, which is quite unusual for Space Marines.
To be fair, there are a few Space Marine chapters that do right by people, and then there are those that
emphasis on
few
blindly. Though, because they're pretty horrible guys.
Like, you got to look at, like, stuff like the Black Templars, who are these religious zealots who basically crucify anybody who shows any signs of, like, connection to the warp or anything like that, including other Marines. And innocent citizens of the Imperium. You've got the Inquisition, who the clue's in the name.
Commissars shooting their own soldiers on the battlefield. Like,
it's a weird one, because when they write the books for 40k, they will sort of try and portray the characters in a heroic fashion. But then you look at the agendas that they're actually championing, and you're like, well, you're basically xenophobic, like, conquerors.
Oh yeah, it's horrible. Horrible.
I think it's one of the reasons that I've just never embraced 40k the way that I've been able to embrace, like, the other Warhammer universes. Like, it doesn't really feel like there is any salvation. Doesn't really feel like, because I tend to gravitate towards like the good guys, and I know it's not always black and white, and in many respects I think, you know, a character that's striving to be good rather than a character that necessarily is good is more interesting, more relatable.
Sure, yeah.
I think that's what most of us are doing, right? What we should be doing. Like, you know, we're flawed, but we're trying to do right by each other. And I think we've talked about it on the podcast before that, like, you know, part of I think being a good person starts with like checking your worst impulses. And so saying that to say those are the kind of characters and factions I gravitate towards, and I don't really see that in 40k. And I know that's what some people love about it, but for me, I struggle to put myself in that world, if that makes sense.
No, I get
sure.
that.
It is a divisive setting, and I think in a weird way, because it was built in the same sort of fashion as the old world in Warhammer Fantasy was, as in they just borrowed elements from existing science fiction, but in a strange way, when they combined everything, it actually makes it a relatively like unique sci-fi setting. Like I was utterly
talking,
believed it is.
I just remembered this. I thought I should share this in the podcast. I was talking to my mate Steve, who's like one of my clan mates from when I played Destiny. I was catching up with him over like the Christmas break, and I was just talking about like how I was doing a bit of painting and that. And I didn't know this, but he was telling me he listens to a lot of the 40k audiobooks, and I was like, oh cool, yeah. Well,
they're hugely popular, yeah.
And he says I like them. He says, but see, because he's listening to the Horus Heresy, he's like, see when they have those moments where like the Emperor appears and like all these guys are like bursting into tears and all that, it just pulls you right out of it. Like, what's going on? all these grown ass, like hard ass war machines, and they're just like sobbing because this dude's appeared.
I like to imagine a lot of the 40k fiction has a strong element of unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
Like the Imperium's notoriously bad for record keeping, and anything that the Emperor does is always portrayed as being absolutely brilliant. So,
my favorite novel series for 40k by far, and it's the only one I really read consistently, is the Caiaphas Cain series, because to me that is probably the most relatable and realistic interpretation. The way he sees things, the way he describes things, and the way events go down is probably as consistent to the reality of the situation would be, in my opinion.
Yeah, going back to the Tau, I don't even hate them as a faction. In fact, they're one that at some point in my boredom I will probably collect, because again, like the model line in general is pretty strong. Like, I love the battle suits. All the battle suit minis look great. It's just fun to wail on them, you know.
To me, they are the anime insert for like 40k. They are the, I want mecha, and I think really they should have been reserved for that. I know on the last episode we were talking about the new baby carrier sister unit, and I think things like that should have been left, on the sideline, and let the Tau have the mecha. Let that be their thing. Sure. That they do the piloted Gundams rather than having them in every faction. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I'm going to move things away from Games Workshop for a moment, and we're going to briefly touch on Magic the Gathering, and I'm going to say anyone who plays blue in Magic the Gathering...
Yeah, I'll echo that.
Yeah. Blue basically just stops your opponent from playing the game, just ever. And it is horrible to play against. It is a really frustrating experience. However, I'm
gonna say, when Magic the Gathering players like go into all the jargon and all that in front of people that don't play the game, and then
that's
like,
the faction you hate is Magic the Gathering players.
because they like right. Yeah,
I'm
cool.
keeping this brief because I'm aware that you don't play. But the only caveat I'm going to add to that is I am the embodiment of the quote, you either die a hero or live long enough to become a villain, and I now end up playing blue quite a bit. So...
I have a non-40k, not so much a faction, but a style of play, and I think Ben's going to agree with me. And it's going to seem like
I'm... This is the guy who draws all the cards.
It's going to seem like I'm attacking Josh.
I knew one of you was going to do it.
But it's when you're playing a draft game and some douchebag at the table drafts every card draw, and you sit and watch them... and I'll phrase this as delicately as I can. You sit and watch them fundamentally play with themselves while you sit doing nothing in the game that you wanted to play. While they spend 30 minutes drawing
I'm having such a great time.
Guys, you all know how I play these kind of games. If you sit down to play one of those games with me, you've got yourselves to blame at this stage.
No, we haven't, because you could not do it. It's funny, I kind of wish I could get a fly on a wall and have it captured when I play one of those games with you, and you can just see the withering look in my eye as I die a little bit every time you draft a card draw or you start doing that particular play.
I want to point out.
No, I want to point something out. You know, I want to point. So I'm just hijacking the podcast now. What I want to say, do you know what makes this tactic so annoying? Is that a lot of the time Josh does this and he doesn't necessarily win because it's not the best thing to do. He just loves doing it. That's what's so annoying about it. Because see if it like guaranteed a win, you could almost understand it, but it is as though he loves torturing people, and that's the only reason he does it.
I would just like to say, Tom, that the last time you and I sat down and played Legendary, you asked me not to do that, and I respected that.
You did. And I do appreciate it. It was quite funny, actually, because there was a point where I think there was only like one card that wasn't card draw on the board, and Josh was like, I'm going to recruit one of these card draw, and the way he looked at me like as he recruited it was kind of like a dog that had just peed on the carpet, you know? I am sorry about this. I can't help myself.
Yeah.
I think like Josh told me about that last game, and I think one of the things that you said to him, Tom, was you said to Josh, you know, you're the reason that Ben doesn't play this game anymore.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so are we basically saying that I'm one of the factions that people love to hate?
You are representative of a faction.
Okay.
Yeah. You also represent the guy who rolls ridiculously well. In fact, you're just really bad to play games with.
I can't help the rolling. I can't help that. What can I do about that?
Josh and his feel no pain. Oh, that's another 6 6s.
Well, mind. That's not a rule now in Death Guard, so you won't have to put up with that anymore.
Do you know what is a rule in Games Workshop games now? I'm not even joking. Is complaining about your opponent's dice rolls.
What?
Oh, is this like a sort of community thing?
Yeah. So in the General's Handbook, there's a code of conduct for playing the games, and that is within it now.
I would be kicked out of a tournament. Day one, Mach 1. This dick won't stop rolling above 4. Carried out screaming by Warhammer-clad bouncers.
Oh dear. I think that's as good a point as any to sort of draw this discussion to a close.
No, it's not. No, because you didn't talk about my favourite game, you dick butt.
Oh?
Yeah, Age of Sigmar.
I beg your pardon.
A very aggressive podcast episode.
Yeah. In my head, I kind of think of it still as like similar to Warhammer Fantasy. But what is your favourite faction to hate in Age of Sigmar?
Tzeentch.
Okay. Why?
Well, because they're like wizard nerds. So there's that kind of... I play Fire Slayers. We're kind of like the jocks, you know?
Mm-hmm.
slap those nerds about. But I like the aesthetic of Tzeentch. I like Tzeentch and the fluff and all that, but sometimes playing against Tzeentch is soul destroying. And I think this was true. This was true of fantasy as well, right? Because it's like sometimes you're basically just playing against a magic gun line. You know, magic
is it?
artillery.
I was going to ask if it's the Destiny dice mechanic.
No, I don't feel like that's overly busted because that is their like army rule. That's their characteristic, right? Like Fire Slayers have got their runes. It's a very good mechanic they've got, but it's specifically the Lord of Change has got this spell called Infernal Gateway, and it's horrible.
Ah, Big Bird.
Yeah, I hate it.
I would
so
actually
much.
say, on the opposite side of that, Ben, you say playing against Tzeentch in Age of Sigmar is pretty soul destroying. On the flip side of that, I would say playing as Tzeentch in Age of Sigmar is pretty soul destroying. As we saw from my Breathe for Rains, that faction that led to me selling the army immediately afterwards.
Yeah. In hindsight, I think though, because that was a doubles game, I think we should have mixed up the pairings a bit there.
Hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a faction in Age of Sigmar that I love to hate. I will say, even though
I would have thought, given that you guys have been a bit long in the tooth as far as hobby stuff goes, that and given that Age of Sigmar's got a lot of brand new factions, there must be something like aesthetically you're maybe a bit not.
Well, what I was gonna say is there's no specific faction, but like despite the fact I'm an old school like undead player, Nagash is a little bitch. Like Nagash needs really taken down a peg or two, right?
Well, that might be happening, right? Because Teclis has called him out, hasn't he?
Yeah.
We're gonna have
It'd
a
be
nerd
cool
off,
if it was
guys.
someone other than Teclis doing it, but I'll take Teclis beating him up.
I mean,
Right,
secretly, we all want Gotrek to leather him, right? That's what we'd like to see.
I think I think we want to see Gotrek leather everyone. I think we want like the Age of Sigmar Royal Rumble happening, and like Gotrek is the last one out into the ring. Yeah. The commentators go nuts, claim they've never seen anything like this in their whole careers, and just see Gotrek leather everyone in the ring.
Yeah, Gotrek is the Undertaker of Warhammer, isn't he? He's the guy you never get tired of seeing win.
Yeah.
Fair.
Do you have like a faction for Age of Sigmar that you love to hate?
Come on.
It's Lumineth Realm.
Of course it is.
For largely the same reasons as High Elves, but just with sillier models.
It's just the aesthetics. I have no idea what the rules are. Like, just see last episode for reference on that one.
Yeah. Click previous episode, guys, and we talk plenty
The Silly
about
Hat Brigade.
Yeah, it's just the worst.
At least, Chaos Dwarfs wore the Silly Hat Brigade well.
Yeah,
So-
they rocked those. I don't know what you
hats.
call them. Kind of top hat, weird
Yeah.
stuff.
They kind of leaned into that sort of Babylonian aesthetic, didn't they?
Yeah.
With, like, the braided beards and the big hats.
Yeah, I liked Chaos Dwarves. They had a quite a unique look, but yeah, I'm not a fan of the Luminous. I just think they always look like they're going to fall over. Like the helmet's just going to kind of drag them backwards, kind of comedy style.
Nice.
As a
right.
dwarf player, when they brought them out, I was a bit like, "What the hell, man?" Because it's like the hammers and the horns and the helmet. That's our thing. You don't get that.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying watching Josh squeaming because this episode's going quite long and he's got to edit it.
We're over an hour long, guys. Like this is I'm gonna have a long Sunday morning editing this. But we have apologies, Ben. We have now covered Age of Sigmar. Unless you have
Thank
anything
you.
to add.
No, I'm finished. Thank you.
Excellent. And with that, we shall draw this episode to a close. So, once again, thank you very much for listening, guys. What factions do you love to hate? Have we got anything wrong? Have we? Let us know in comments below and on social medias, etc., etc. And until next time.
Social
Take
medias? What the hell is social medias?
Social medias. Anyway, bye.
Media is the plural.
Bye.